Welcome to ThinkLessPsy, where we dissect the psychology they don't want you to see. If you're tired of motivational lies and ready for uncomfortable truths, subscribe now. Today's topic cuts deep. We're exploring the fear of losing your job in a country called stable. Why security breeds the most dangerous insecurity of all. There's a peculiar madness that settles over a society when it calls itself stable. Not the madness of chaos, but something quieter, more insidious. It's the madness of a man who stands on solid ground, yet cannot stop looking down at his feet, convinced the earth beneath him will crack at any moment. In Australia, we've built something remarkable, a prosperous economy, robust institutions, a social safety net that catches most who fall. We call it stability. We call it success. And yet, in the chest of nearly every working person, there sits a small, hard stone of fear, the fear of losing your job. Not because the country is collapsing, but precisely because it isn't. This is the paradox we must examine. Why does security breed insecurity? Why does the very architecture designed to protect us become the cage we fear escaping? The answer lies not in economics, but in something far more fundamental. In the psychology of dependence, in the transformation of human beings into components of a system, in the slow death of sovereignty that occurs when we mistake participation for freedom. Survival, once assured, doesn't liberate us. It repositions our fears. When our ancestors worried about finding food, the threat was immediate, visceral, honest. You knew your enemy. You could see it, fight it, or run from it. But modern fear is different. It wears a suit and tie. It speaks the language of performance reviews and restructures and market conditions. It doesn't threaten your life. It threatens your place. And your place, you've been taught, is everything. Consider what happens to a person in a stable economy. They are born into a world of structures already built, schools that funnel into universities that funnel into careers, each step mapped, each progression predictable. The implicit promise is simple: follow the path and you will be safe. Get the degree, land the job, climb the ladder. The system will hold you, and for a time it does. You earn, you spend, you borrow against future earnings. You buy the house, the car, the lifestyle. You build a life not on bedrock, but on the assumption that your position within the system is permanent. But nothing in a market economy is permanent. The very mechanisms that create stability, competition, efficiency, innovation, also create precarity. The company must grow or die. The worker must perform or be replaced. The system demands optimization, and you, whether you recognize it or not, are a variable in an equation of profit. When the equation changes, variables get eliminated. Not because you failed, but because the logic of the system is indifferent to your personhood. You are valuable until you're not. You are needed until you're not. The stability of the country doesn't guarantee the stability of your position within it. This is where the fear metastasizes. It's not merely the fear of unemployment, it's the fear of irrelevance, of being replaced by someone younger, cheaper, more willing to endure what you've grown tired of enduring. It's the fear that the skills you spent years developing are already obsolete, that the expertise you take pride in can be automated or outsourced. It's the fear of discovering that you were never as essential as you believed, that the system will continue without you, barely noticing your absence. What makes this fear particularly corrosive is its silence. In a country that calls itself stable, admitting this fear feels like personal failure. Everyone around you appears confident, secure, ascending. To voice your anxiety is to reveal weakness. So you carry it privately. You smile at work while your stomach churns. You update your LinkedIn profile at midnight. You apply for jobs you don't want as insurance against losing the job you have. The fear becomes a secret companion, a constant low-grade hum of dread that colours every decision, every conversation, every quiet moment before sleep. And here's what you must understand. This fear is not incidental. It is structural. It is designed into the system, though no one sat down and planned it that way. A workforce that fears job loss is a compliant workforce. They don't demand too much. They don't rock the boat. They absorb longer hours, accept stagnant wages, tolerate conditions they once would have rejected. Fear makes people manageable. It keeps them competing against each other rather than questioning the terms of the competition itself. The person beside you at work is not your colleague. They're your potential replacement. And you're theirs. This transforms human relationships into strategic calculations. You network not out of genuine connection, but out of necessity. You maintain appearances not because you want to, but because you must be seen as valuable, relevant, indispensable. Your identity becomes fused with your economic function. When someone asks who you are, you tell them what you do. Because what you do is how the system values you. And if the system doesn't value you, what are you? The philosophers of old understood something we've forgotten. The Stoics spoke of the distinction between what is within your control and what is not. Your job is not within your control. The market is not within your control. The whims of executives and shareholders and global economics, none of it is within your control. Yet we live as though our frantic efforts to secure our position can somehow override these realities. We confuse activity with agency. We mistake anxiety for preparation. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire yet understood the poverty of dependence, wrote that the man who fears death or poverty or disgrace is a slave to circumstances. He cannot be free, because his peace depends on conditions he cannot guarantee. The modern worker who fears job loss is no different. Their freedom is illusory. They have autonomy over trivial choices, where to eat lunch, which streaming service to subscribe to. But the fundamental architecture of their existence is determined by forces beyond their influence. They are sovereign over nothing that matters. This is not to romanticize poverty or suggest that employment doesn't matter. It does. But there's a difference between needing a job to survive and needing a job to exist. The former is practical, the latter is pathological. When your entire sense of self, your entire sense of security, your entire sense of worth is tied to a position within a system that doesn't guarantee that position, you have surrendered something essential. You have made yourself psychologically dependent on something fundamentally unreliable. Now ask yourself, who benefits from this arrangement? Not you. Your fear doesn't make you more secure, it makes you more controllable. The system benefits. The corporations benefit. The structures of power that require a population willing to trade sovereignty for the illusion of stability, they benefit. Your anxiety is profitable. It keeps you striving, spending, sacrificing. It keeps you focused on competition with your peers rather than examination of the terms under which you're all competing. There's a particular cruelty in being told you live in a stable country while experiencing profound instability in your daily existence. The macro statistics, GDP growth, low unemployment rates, rising house prices, these are supposed to comfort you. Look how well we're doing, the narrative says. But you don't feel it. You feel precarious. You feel expendable. And when you express this, you're told you're being irrational, anxious, ungrateful. After all, you have a job, don't you? In a stable country, what more do you want? What you want, though you may not have language for it, is internal stability. A sense of self that doesn't collapse when external circumstances change. A source of worth that doesn't depend on quarterly performance or market conditions. The ability to say, I may lose this job, but I will not lose myself. But you haven't been taught to build that. You've been taught to build a resume. The difference between the person who is destroyed by job loss and the person who endures it is not optimism or resilience in the motivational sense. It's philosophical architecture. It's the foundational beliefs about what constitutes a life of value. If you believe your value is determined by your economic function, then losing that function is an existential crisis. If you believe your value is intrinsic, that you possess worth independent of productivity or position, then job loss is painful but not annihilating. It's a change in circumstance, not a negation of being. This is the strategic shift required. Not positive thinking, not affirmations or manifestation or any of the other shallow remedies peddled to anxious workers, but a fundamental reconstruction of how you understand your relationship to work, to systems, to stability itself. You must see clearly what you've been trained not to see, that the stability of the country and the stability of your position within it are not the same thing. That participation in the system is not the same as dependence on it. That you can engage with structures without surrendering your sovereignty to them. Consider the person who has built their life entirely within the boundaries of corporate employment. Every skill they possess is marketable. Every relationship they maintain is professional. Every decision they make is calculated for career advancement. They have optimized themselves perfectly for the system. And the system rewards them until it doesn't. When the restructure comes, when the market shifts, when the algorithm determines their role is redundant, they have nothing to fall back on. No alternate source of identity, no skills unrelated to their profession, no life outside the structure. They collapse inward because they built everything on sand they mistook for bedrock. Now consider a different approach. You still work, you still participate, but you do not identify with your participation. Your job is a thing you do, not a thing you are. You develop capabilities outside the market's valuation. You build relationships that aren't transactional. You create meaning that doesn't depend on productivity. You maintain a sense of self that exists independent of your economic function. This doesn't make you immune to the pain of job loss, but it makes you capable of surviving it without disintegration. This is psychological sovereignty, not independence from systems, that's impossible in a modern society, but independence within systems. You engage without being consumed. You participate without surrendering your core. You recognize that the system is a tool, not a temple. It serves functions, provides resources, creates opportunities, but it is not the source of your worth. And its withdrawal of validation is not a withdrawal of your right to exist. The process of building this sovereignty is neither quick nor comfortable. It requires confronting the ways you've made yourself dependent, the ways you've outsourced your sense of security to structures that cannot guarantee it. It requires acknowledging that much of what you've been taught about success is a mechanism of control, not a path to freedom. It requires sitting with the discomfort of uncertainty, rather than numbing it with frantic productivity. There are stages to this transformation, though they don't unfold neatly. First comes recognition. You must see the fear clearly, not as a personal failing, but as a systemic feature. You must understand that your anxiety is not irrational. It's a rational response to an actually precarious situation. The country may be stable, but your position within its economic machinery is not. Seeing this clearly is painful, but it's necessary. You cannot address what you refuse to acknowledge. Then comes the confrontation. This is where you examine every belief you hold about work, worth, and security. Why do you believe your value depends on employment? Who taught you that? What evidence supports it? When you imagine losing your job, what specifically terrifies you? Is it poverty, or is it shame? Is it material hardship, or is it the loss of identity? Most people discover that the fear runs deeper than practical concerns. It touches something fundamental about how they understand their place in the world. Integration follows confrontation. This is where you begin to rebuild, to construct a sense of self that incorporates the truth of precarity without being destroyed by it. You accept that you cannot control the system, but you can control how you position yourself in relation to it. You develop capabilities outside your profession. You create sources of meaning beyond work. You build relationships that aren't contingent on your economic status. You practice existing without the constant need for external validation. Finally, reconstruction. You build a life that acknowledges the reality of the system while refusing to be defined by it. You work, but you don't worship work. You plan, but you don't cling to plans. You recognize that stability is not a permanent state, but a temporary condition. And you structure your psychology accordingly. You become like water, capable of taking the shape of the container you're in, but never becoming the container itself. This is not a prescription for dropping out or rejecting society. It's a framework for engagement without enslavement. You can participate in the economy, pursue your career, seek advancement, but from a position of internal stability rather than desperate dependence. The difference is profound. The desperate person acts from fear. The sovereign person acts from choice. Both may take the same actions externally, but the internal experience is entirely different. One is driven. The other is deliberate. And here's what you'll discover through this process. The fear doesn't disappear entirely. That's not the goal. The goal is to change your relationship with the fear. Instead of running from it or being paralyzed by it, you can acknowledge it, examine it, learn from it. Fear becomes information rather than identity. It signals risk without dictating response. You can feel afraid and still act with agency. You can recognize precarity without collapsing into it. The country will remain stable, at least in the macro sense. The economy will continue to generate wealth, opportunity, growth. The systems will persist, but you will understand that your stability cannot depend on theirs. You will see that the promise of security in exchange for compliance was always partial, always conditional, always subject to forces beyond your control. And in seeing this clearly, you'll find a strange freedom. Not the freedom from work or worry, but the freedom to engage with both on your own terms. The people around you will continue to perform their anxiety through workaholism, through constant networking, through desperate optimization of every aspect of their lives. They will continue to mistake busyness for security and competition for achievement. They will continue to surrender their lives to the system in exchange for the illusion of permanence. You don't need to judge them. You were them. Perhaps in some ways, you still are, but you're beginning to see another possibility. The difference between the enslaved and the sovereign is not circumstance, it's consciousness. Two people can hold the same job, earn the same wage, face the same risks, and experience entirely different realities. One is a hostage to their position, the other is a participant in their life. One's peace depends on external validation, the other's is internally generated. One fears the future because they've surrendered their present. The other engages the future because they own their present. This is the work. Not the work your employer pays you for, but the work of reclaiming your psychological sovereignty, of building a self that can endure disruption without dissolution, of recognizing that you are not your job, not your title, not your productivity. You are the consciousness that experiences all of these things, and that consciousness is the only stable thing you'll ever have. The fear of job loss in a stable country is not a personal pathology. It's a structural reality. The system requires your anxiety to function efficiently. Your liberation begins when you recognize this, when you see the machinery clearly and refuse to let it define you. The country's stability is not your stability. Their metrics are not your meaning. Their validation is not your value. You may lose your job tomorrow or 10 years from now or never. The system may reward you or discard you. The market may rise or collapse. None of it determines who you are, unless you've surrendered that determination to forces you cannot control. And that surrender is always a choice, even when it doesn't feel like one. The path forward is not security. That was always a mirage. It's sovereignty. Build it slowly. Build it deliberately. Build it beneath the radar of the systems that would prefer you remain dependent. And when the ground beneath you shifts, as it inevitably will, you'll discover you were never standing on the ground at all. You were standing on yourself. That's where the fear finally loses its power. So here's your choice. You can close this video and return to the performance, smiling at work while your stomach churns, pretending you're fine while the fear eats you from inside. Or you can stay awake. Build the sovereignty we talked about. Start today. If this video disturbed something in you, good. That's the point. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, share this with someone who needs to hear it. We're building a community of people who refuse to be psychologically enslaved by systems that call themselves stable.